My dad once told me, "Pathetic boy, you never had what it takes to succeed." Not long after hearing that, I became a nationwide sensation. I'd just been recognized as one of the youngest male entrepreneurs to make waves on Wall Street at our family barbecue. The whole crowd went quiet the moment I pulled up in my Ferrari. My name's Joshua Langford. I'm 23 years old, and I built a financial tech startup from the ground up right here in Charleston, South Carolina. Around where I grew up, success was measured by calloused hands and a sunburned neck. My dad, Nathan, ran a landscaping company for 3 decades and believed a man's value was in hard physical work. So when I decided to chase finance instead of stepping into the family business, the look of disappointment in his eyes hurt far more than any shovel ever could. For 3 years, I poured myself into developing an algorithm that could predict market trends more accurately than the big players' nights, weekends, even holidays. While my friends were out living their lives, I was hunched over my laptop. My dad would walk past my room, shake his head, and mutter something about boys playing with computers. Every single time, I'd stay up another hour, determined to prove him wrong. Last month, at a family dinner, I overheard him telling my uncle, "Joshua will be back mowing lawns by summer," and laughed. That kid couldn't sell water in the desert. I didn't respond. I just ate my dinner, helped clean up, and then drove back to my apartment to close the biggest deal of my life. Growing up, I watched my dad grow his landscaping company from a single old truck into a fleet of 20 vehicles. Every summer since I was 12, I worked alongside him, cutting grass, planting trees, hauling mulch under the Carolina sun. He taught me the value of hard work, but somewhere along the line he confused hard work with just hard labor. When I got accepted into the business program at the University of South Carolina, he barely gave me a nod. "College boys think they know everything until the real world knocks," he said, slipping me $20 and calling it a send-off. My mom, Denise, was different. She secretly handed me $500 saved from her teaching salary and whispered, "Go make something of yourself that makes you happy." She never said that in front of my dad. During my sophomore year, I created an algorithm that caught one of my professor's attention. "This could totally change how regular people invest," he told me. I dropped out the next semester to focus on turning it into a real business. When I called home to explain, my mom cried. My dad hung up on me. For 2 years, I lived on ramen noodles and worked out of a cramped apartment shared with 2 roommates. One venture capitalist after another rejected me. "Too young," they said, "not enough experience." I printed every rejection email and taped them to my wall, not as motivation but as a reminder of who didn't believe in me. Thomas Blake, my roommate from freshman year, stuck by my side. He brought me food when I forgot to eat, proofread my pitches, and never once doubted I'd make it. "You're the smartest person I know," he'd say. "Just don't forget us little people when you're rich." Meanwhile, my dad's remarks only got harsher. At Thanksgiving, he introduced me to clients as his son who's still figuring things out. At Christmas, he suggested I apply for a manager job at his company since that computer stuff wasn't working out. I noticed how he'd abruptly change the subject whenever I tried to explain my work, interrupting mid-sentence to comment on a neighbor's perfect lawn. Not once did he ask to see what I was building. On my 23rd birthday, I got an email from Blackwater Capital, one of the biggest hedge funds on the East Coast. They wanted to license my technology exclusively for $14 million. I stood in my kitchen, rereading the email 17 times, coffee cooling in my hand. I called Thomas first. He screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Then I called my mom. She cried again, but this time it was different tears. I didn't call my dad. 3 days later, I signed the contracts in New York. The Blackwater executives treated me to dinner at a place where the menu had no prices. The CEO, Patricia Donovan, raised her glass. "To the future of finance," she said. Everyone clinked glasses. I smiled, but all I could hear was my father's voice echoing in my mind. "Pathetic boy, You never had a head for success. That night, back in my hotel room, I got a text from my cousin Evan, the only family member who ever showed genuine interest in my work. Just saw the Wall Street Journal article, "Holy Josh, you're famous." I opened my laptop and there it was. My face, my company, my story splashed across every financial news site. 23-year-old dropout lands 8-figure deal with Wall Street giant. The article mentioned my age 3 times as if it were the most extraordinary thing about me. I closed the laptop and stared out at the New York skyline. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I just felt clear. Like fog lifting off the harbor back home, I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I walked into a Ferrari dealership dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. The salesman ignored me until I casually mentioned the price range I was considering. 2 hours later, I was driving out in a red Ferrari Roma, not because I especially wanted one, but because I needed to send a message loud and clear. I didn't call ahead before driving home to Charleston. I knew my dad's annual Memorial Day barbecue would be happening, the event where he invited all his clients, employees, and extended family to flaunt his success. I timed my arrival for exactly 2 p.m., right when everyone was gathered in the backyard. As I pulled into the driveway, the roar of the engine caught attention before anyone could even see the car I parked right beside my dad's pickup truck, the one he always bragged about, and took a deep breath. This wasn't about revenge. It was about finally being seen. I stepped into the backyard holding nothing but my car keys. The conversation stopped like someone hit pause. My mom covered her mouth in shock. My dad stood at the grill, spatula frozen mid-flip. "Sorry I'm late," I said as I walked toward him. Traffic from New York was terrible. He recovered fast, slipping into the smile he reserved for clients. "Well, look who finally decided to show up." He clapped my shoulder too hard. "Whose car did you borrow to make that entrance, son?" The guest laughed. "I didn't borrow it," I said softly. "It's mine, bought it yesterday, remember?" He nodded, giving Uncle Frank a wink. "And I'm buying a private jet next week." More laughter. I pulled the car title from my back pocket and handed it to him. His expression shifted as he read it carefully. He folded it and handed it back. "Must be nice to have rich friends who trust you with their toys," he said, turning back to the grill. "Grab a plate. Your mom made potato salad." All afternoon, I tried to have a real conversation with him. Every time, he brushed me off when I brought up the deal. He quickly steered the conversation toward landscaping contracts instead. Every time I attempted to explain the technology, he suddenly found a reason to refill the cooler. Once, when his business partner asked about the Wall Street Journal article, my dad cut in sharply. "Don't trust everything you read. Pete, reporters tend to blow things out of proportion these days." By the time night fell, most guests had filtered out. I found my father in his office, working through paperwork like he always did after hosting. "Dad, we need to talk about my company's situation," I said. Without looking up, he replied, "There's nothing to discuss. You just got lucky with some computer nonsense. Don't fool yourself into thinking it makes you special." $14 million isn't luck, I said steadily. At last, he glanced my way, eyes narrowing. "Do you know what built this family? 40 years of hard, back-breaking labor, not sitting around pushing buttons or fiddling with numbers on a screen." He pointed toward a picture on the wall, a younger version of himself standing next to his very first truck. "That's real work. That's real success." "What I built is real too," I responded. "Is it?" He leaned in closer. "Listen, Joshua, I've seen people like you before, flashes in the pan who think success is permanent. You'll blow through that money in no time, and those Wall Street sharks will discard you as soon as you're no longer useful. Where will that leave you then?" I stayed silent. "You'll be back here," he continued, "begging for a job, and I'll have to explain to everyone why my own son couldn't cut it in the real world." Without another word, I left his office. In the kitchen, My mother was drying dishes. She looked up, hands wiping on a towel. "He's proud of you," she said quietly. "He just doesn't know how to express it." I shook my head. "No, Mom, it's not pride, he's scared." The next morning, my cousin Evan called. "Uncle Nathan's telling everyone your deal collapsed and that you lied about everything, said you rented that car just to show off." A chill settled over me. Not anger, but cold certainty. For the next week, I stayed in a downtown Charleston hotel instead of at my parents' house. I met with lawyers, financial advisors, and my growing team, but whispers about my father, me, and my company kept circling in the background. Thomas sent a text. "Your dad stopped by the apartment asking where the money's going." My aunt phoned. "Nathan told the church you're caught up in legal trouble with those New York people. Everything okay?" Even Patricia from Blackwater reached out, checking in. "Someone claiming to be your father called asking about our agreement. We didn't give him anything." On a Tuesday afternoon, I headed to my parents' house, knowing Dad would be at work. Mom let me in, moving with anxious energy as she made coffee. "Mom, what's wrong with Dad?" I asked. She sat down, clutching her mug. "He's worried about you, that's all." "Worried enough to call me a liar?" "Worried enough to call your business partners." She looked down. "You have to realize your success threatens everything he's built his identity around." "That's not my issue." "No," she said softly, "but he's making it yours." She hesitated. "There's more. The business has been struggling for years. The big landscaping chains are undercutting his prices. He can't keep up." That hit me harder than I expected. Why didn't he tell me? "Pride," she answered simply. "The same pride that keeps him from celebrating you. If he admits your approach works, he'd have to admit his failed." I promised Mom I'd find a way to fix things. But as I drove away, I realized it was deeper than pride. It was fear. Fear that I represent a future where men like him have no place. That evening I called Uncle Frank, my father's younger brother and business partner. We met at a downtown bar. "He remortgaged the house," Frank said, staring into his beer. "3 years ago. Put everything into new trucks and equipment, trying to keep pace with the big guys, but it's not working." "Why tell me this now?" I asked. Frank looked up. "Because yesterday he asked me if you'd be willing to invest your computer earnings in the landscaping business. He plans to approach you." I leaned back. "So he doesn't believe my success is real, but he wants my money." Frank sighed. "He believes it's real. He just can't admit it." "Your father's proud. He built something from nothing, but the world changed. He didn't." On the drive home, I passed my father's business. The lights were still on. I parked across the street and watched him through the window, hunched over paperwork. For a moment, I saw him not as my dad, but as a man grasping for options in a fading past. I realized his attacks on me weren't just resentment of my success. They were his way of explaining his own failures. If my way was wrong, then his wasn't failing. It was simply unrecognized in a world that no longer values hard labor. The next morning, I received a text from him. "Need to discuss business opportunity, dinner tomorrow at 7 p.m. I replied with one word, "Yes." But I didn't attend dinner. Instead, I spent the day setting plans in motion. First, I called Patricia at Blackwater. "I need info on Charleston landscaping companies. Who's up for acquisition? Who's expanding?" By noon, I had a list of the 3 largest players. By mid-afternoon, I scheduled meetings with 2. Then, I contacted a commercial real estate agent looking for properties for a tech incubator, preferably in Charleston's old industrial district. The following morning, I met with Harold Jenkins, owner of Greenscape Enterprises, the state's largest landscaping company, who was aggressively expanding. "We've been watching Langford Landscaping for a while," he said, after I explained my interest. "Great service area and loyal clients, but Nathan won't return my calls." "What if I could change that?" I asked. By evening, I had a written offer. Greenscape would purchase my father's company for $1.20 million, double its current paper value, With a 5-year contract employing my father as a regional manager, all employees would keep their jobs with improved benefits. I also signed a lease for a 15,000 square foot warehouse I planned to convert into headquarters for my new company. I was bringing operations back to Charleston. The final piece fell into place when I hired Evan, freshly graduated with a business degree, as my chief operating officer. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "I've never managed anything before." "Neither have I," I replied. "But you believe in what we're building, and that's what counts." 3 days after I skipped dinner with my dad, I still hadn't replied to his increasingly impatient messages. Instead, I showed up at his office unannounced, carrying a folder under my arm. He looked up, a flash of anger crossing his face. "So, you decided to finally bless me with your presence, huh? After standing me up." I placed the folder firmly on his desk. "This is way more important than dinner." "What's this?" he asked, tone dripping with sarcasm. "Your big investment in my company?" I shook my head. "No, it's an acquisition proposal from Greenscape. They want to buy Langford Landscaping." The color drained from his face. "You went behind my back." "I went ahead of you," I corrected. "The business is failing, Dad. You and I both know that this offer preserves your legacy. Your employees keep their jobs. You stay on as regional manager, with profit sharing." His voice rose, frustration creeping in. "So that's your plan? To swoop in with your Wall Street connections and take over the business I built?" I shook my head firmly. "The business you built is dying. This is what saves it." He stood, his hands trembling ever so slightly. "Get out." I wasn't done reaching into my jacket. I placed a key on his desk. He stared at it, puzzled. "What's this supposed to be?" "It's the key to my Ferrari. Consider it a gift." His eyes narrowed suspiciously. "I don't want your charity." "It's not charity. It's an advance." I headed toward the door, then paused. "The offer expires in 48 hours. After that, Greenscape will start talking to your competitors. Think about your employees, Dad. Think about Mom." As I walked away, I heard him pick up the key. The next morning, my mom sent me a text. "He drove the car today. Didn't say a word, just drove it." By that evening, my father had called Harold Jenkins at Greenscape within 24 hours. They had a deal in principle. I kept quiet, watching from afar as my dad signed over the business he had spent over 40 years building. Sitting at that conference table, he looked smaller somehow. But when he left the room, the keys to my Ferrari still in his pocket, his posture was straight and steady. 2 months later, I stood on a makeshift stage inside our freshly renovated headquarters. 200 people gathered, employees, local business leaders, journalists, family. My father stood near the back, arms crossed, still uneasy in rooms like this. "Today, we officially launch Horizon Analytics," I announced. "Our mission is to make financial technology accessible to everyone, not just the big Wall Street firms, and we're proud to do it right here in Charleston." Applause filled the space. "We're also announcing our first local partnership. Horizon is investing $2 million in Greenscape Regional Holdings, the newly formed parent company of several landscaping businesses, including the former Langford Landscaping." A murmur ran through the crowd. My father's head snapped up. "As part of this investment, we're launching a technology initiative to help traditional service industries compete in the digital economy. I'm pleased to announce that Nathan Langford will lead this program as Director of Traditional Industries." The room erupted in applause for the first time. I looked directly at my father. His expression was unreadable. "Nathan has built something valuable over 4 decades. Knowledge that can't be coded into an algorithm, experience that can't be taught in a classroom. By combining his expertise with our technology, we're not replacing the old with the new. We're building something stronger than either could be on their own." After the presentation, as people mingled and celebrated, my father finally approached me. "You planned this from the start," he said quietly. "It wasn't a question," I replied. "I wanted to build something that matters." He glanced around the bustling room, employees rushing by with purpose, the company logo on the wall. "Your name isn't on the building," he observed. "Neither was yours," I said, "but everyone knows who built it." For the first time since I was a kid, I saw something close to respect in his eyes, not approval. We were beyond that. But recognition, one builder to another. He extended his hand, I shook it. "The Ferrari's yours," I told him. "Consider it a signing bonus." A faint smile crossed his face. "Already sold it, bought a truck instead, and I put the rest into your company's stock." 6 months later, I sat in my office overlooking the Cooper River. On my desk sat a framed article from the Charleston Business Journal. Local tech firm partners with traditional industries, creating 150 new jobs. My father and I weren't close, and probably never would be, but we'd forged a new kind of relationship. Once a week, we had lunch to discuss the traditional industries program he'd started, bringing in other local business owners, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, men like him being left behind by technology. "They don't need handouts," he told me during one of our meetings. "They need tools that actually work for them." I listened carefully because he was right. The partnership with Greenscape had exceeded every expectation. My dad's expertise combined with our tech platform had expanded their reach across 3 states. The same employees who once worked for him now had stock options and better health care. My mom had finally quit teaching and was traveling, a dream she'd always had but never afforded. "Your dad even took a cooking class with me in Italy," she told me, laughing during one of our weekly calls. "Can you believe it?" Thomas had joined us as marketing director. Evan was thriving as COO. We hired 30 graduates from local colleges, creating a talent pipeline so bright they didn't have to leave Charleston to find opportunity. As for me, I traded proving myself for building something lasting. The $14 million deal that once seemed like everything was now just the start of a much bigger journey. That evening, as I left the office, I passed the wall where we displayed our company values. At the bottom was a new phrase my father had suggested during one of our meetings. "Remember whose shoulders you stand on." I stepped out into the parking lot, where my modest black sedan was parked beside my father's new truck. No fancy cars needed anymore. We'd both made our point driving home along the water. I thought about success, how I'd once defined it as proving my dad wrong, but now saw it as something we built together. Each in his own way, I'd gotten my revenge, but not how I'd imagined, not by humiliating him or stripping away what mattered to him. Instead, by creating a future big enough to hold his past, by building something neither of us could have done alone. That felt like a true win.